And that ate my time for getting the outlines out. So next week, we'll owe you 3 outlines, the ones for next week, and the one for this week, and the one for last week. And I promise you, I will make good on that. So 3 outlines owed next week. But the outline today, if you want to grab just a sheet of paper and a pencil on the back, you're welcome to do so. The outline today is pretty simple. So if you just want to write it down, you're certainly more than welcome to do that. Genesis 39 is where we are today. And the topic, the theme of our message today is resist temptation like Joseph. That's the title today. Resist temptation like Joseph. And I think we have quite a few things to learn from him there. So I am really excited to jump in here. Genesis 39. Let's read through it together. Now, Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Now his master saw that the Lord was with him, and personal servant, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he owned he put in his charge. It came about that from the time he made him overseer in his house and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. Thus the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned in the house and in the field. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's charge, and with him there he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. It came about after these events that his master's wife looked with desire at Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put all that he owns in my charge. There is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God?" As she spoke to Joseph, day after day, he did not listen to her, to lie beside her or be with her. Now it happened one day that he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the household was there inside. She caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called to the man of her household, and said to them, "See, he has brought in a Hebrew to us to make sport of us. He came into me to lie with me, and I screamed. When he heard that I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled and went outside. So she left his garments beside her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with these words, "The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came into me to make sport of me. And as I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled outside." Now when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, "This is what your slave did to me," his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's charge all the prisoners who were in the jail, so that whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. The chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made to prosper. Resist temptation like Joseph. After the important digression in the family history of Judah, which is what we did last week. And we all understand now why chapter 38 was important, because Judah, the tribe of Judah, is the most important tribe in Israel. It's the tribe from which King David came, and it is the tribe from which or into which Jesus came. So we understand how important it is for us to understand a little bit more about Judah. So that was chapter 38. That was last week. And after that digression, the narrative returns to Joseph, who had prospered under God and had become the attendant or steward over Potiphar's household. So the first point that I think is kind of staring us right in the face, in the first 6 verses of chapter 39, is the Lord was with Joseph in Potiphar's house. Very simple, very easy, very straightforward. What is the first point? The Lord was with Joseph in Potiphar's house. We can see that from the very first verses of this chapter. And I think this point really kind of picks up one of the key phrases of this chapter. And really, if you think about it, Joseph's life, we will hear the name of the Lord in this narrative 4 times. Verse 2, verse 3, and twice in verse 23. The affirmation that the Lord is with Joseph is made twice at the beginning and twice at the end of the story. Now, to be clear, it's not claimed that because of the Lord, everything will work out, nor is it promised that the key actor will be easily saved from trouble. You and I are too old and too experienced in life to know better, right? Just because you are with the Lord doesn't mean everything is going to be peachy and everything is going to be very easy in life. That's not how life works. But the fact that the Lord is with Joseph and he is with us too, as promised in Jesus' last words on this earth, and lo, I'm with you always, makes life make sense amidst the death and destruction around us. That's what this point is saying, I think, here. And if we kind of look through this phrase, it's really interesting. The Lord was with Joseph. The phrase is central to the inexplicable rise and power of David as well. In fact, get your fingers ready. We're going to go through the Bible a little bit. I want to show you a few things. Go in 1 Samuel to your Bible. Keep going towards the book of Psalms. If you get all the way to Psalms, you went too far. Go back a little bit. In 1 Samuel 16, I want to show you this. In 1 Samuel 16, verse 18, look at what it says there about David's rise to power, right? 1 Samuel 16, 18. We read these words. Then one of the young men said, behold, I have seen a son of Jesse. This is a statement made to Samuel, the prophet, whom God sent to anoint the next king of Israel after Saul was rejected for his disobedience. Then one of the young men said to Samuel, behold, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, who is a skillful musician, a mighty man of valor, a warrior, one prudent in speech, and a handsome man. And what? And the Lord is with him. The Lord is with him. That's what was at the very beginning of David's rise to power. And then look to the next chapter, chapter 17, verse 37. This is where David challenges Goliath, who was twice his size and a lot stronger opponent. What is it that allowed David to overcome in that context? We know what it is. Verse 37 says, and David said, 1 Samuel 17:37, and David said, the Lord who delivered me from the jaw of the lion and from the paw of the bear. What's David talking about? He was a shepherd. He had to rescue his sheep from the lion and the bear. He may have come into that battle having never faced Goliath before, but he faced a lion and a bear. And after all, God was the one who helped him before. What's Goliath? compared to that, right? And so he said, and David said, the Lord who delivered me from the jaw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. And then, for example, look at chapter 18, verse 12. We can see in David's subsequent struggles with Saul, chapter 18, verse 12, we learn, now Saul was afraid of David. Why was Saul afraid of David? Saul, at this particular point, is a king of Israel, and David is a young man. Why is Saul afraid of him? Well, the secret is, for the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. And we can kind of continue. Look at verse 14, for example, same chapter. David was prospering in all his ways. Why? For the Lord was with him. Verse 28 of the same chapter says, when Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. Then go to chapter 20 and look at verse 13. This is David and Jonathan in their Saul's son, in their agreement and their covenant. If it please my father to do you harm, Jonathan says to David, may the Lord do so to Jonathan, and more also, if I do not make it known to you and send your way, that you may go in safety, and may the Lord be with you, just as he has been with my father. It's interesting because all the way through his rise to power and his rise to the throne, what is the one factor that we see over and over again mentioned in David's life is that the Lord was with him. The Lord was with him was also employed in much more conflicted and tenuous life of Jeremiah. It is also important in the lives of Isaac and Jacob earlier in this book. You know, I want to make a quick statement here, just so that for clarification's sake, as we're kind of getting into this. You do realize that God's presence with Joseph here does not immediately free him from slavery. It doesn't immediately provide a side door outside of temptation. Now, why do I say that? Because you and I, and I'll go ahead and speak for myself. I'll speak for myself first. That anytime I get into a hard time in life, what do I usually pray for? I'll tell you what I pray for. I pray for deliverance. I pray for the side exit outside of this hardship. I pray for the Lord to immediately and completely take me out of this hardship and deliver me from it. And I'm often reminded, and this story is certainly part of it, that God's presence with Joseph did not immediately lift him out of this slavery and made him a free man. It didn't immediately propel him to the second in command of Egypt, though it eventually did, but it didn't immediately, right? God is there with Joseph in the midst of his trial of slavery, far away from his family and far away from his home. I think this serves as a really great example for us that God does not remove us, or the trial away from us does not mean that he does not love us or care for us. God was with Joseph in the place of his hardship as a slave in Potiphar's house. And the same God can be and is with us in the place of our hardships, empowering us to go on, providing new perspective, opening new doors, giving new ideas. Do you know how I know that? Because next week we begin the celebration of the season of Advent. And what are we going to celebrate? What are we beginning to look forward to next Sunday? The arrival 2,000 years ago of the one whose name is Emmanuel, which means God with us. Such a great reminder. You know, that right there is a sermon in of itself. Amen. Let's close our Bibles, pray. we're done. I mean, that's just the first 3 verses of Genesis 39. Of course, you know me way too well to know that I'm not going to stop there, because there's more to this chapter, and I'll pull out a little bit more. But I think it's just such a such a great reminder for us. Joseph's situation also changed quite drastically from being the favorite in his father's house to right here, Genesis 39, where he is a slave, but God's relationship to him remained the same. God was with him in Jacob's house. God is still with him in Potiphar's house. And so for this reason, Joseph can rise again and again in situations that would surely have crushed others. Such a great example for us here. All right, so back into this, let's get into some of the other nuts and bolts of this story. In verse 1, we are repeating the sense of verse 36 of chapter 37, resuming the Joseph story that was interrupted by the story of Judah and Tamar. Now, I want to remind you this, as I've been continuing to remind you as we go through Genesis. You and I, we're not the first readers of Genesis. The first readers of Genesis were the second generation that had come out of Egypt under Moses, right? So this narrative explains to them why their parents were Egyptian slaves. Make sense? That's who the first readers of Genesis were. And Potiphar here is the one that we already got introduced to at the end of 37, is the one that purchased Joseph. You see, it's interesting because I think Joseph's brothers probably expected that he would be sold as a common laborer in some heavy construction projects. I mean, we can go down to Egypt today and see those amazing pyramids that were built. I've never seen it in person. One of these days, maybe I will. But, just in the last year, I guess, we have also learned something really interesting. If you're paying attention to the news, what we've also learned about these amazing pyramids was that just as they are insanely beautiful and amazing and interesting on top, but we are now learning that there is a lot more perhaps to the mystery of this Egyptian structures by the various levels that we have just now uncovered, and all the different things that are contained under the ground. And all of that was built on the backs of slaves. And that's probably what Joseph's brothers thought that they were selling him into. And so, as such, they probably thought they were getting rid of him, because think about it. This was heavy labor. People didn't last very long in such heavy physical labor under harsh conditions. And so that's probably what they thought they were doing. Yet, because of God's mercy, Joseph was sold to a rich and important royal official. God can do whatever he wants to do. Now, this Pharaoh, according to theologians, and is probably Sesostris II, who ruled from 1897 to 1879 BC. And the Egyptian monuments attest the existence of such an officer in wealthy houses. That's what Joseph was made to be, as kind of the chief slave, the personal attendant, and kind of the top slave there. We see in different tombs that have been unearthed, we see books and writing materials and clerks that pertain to the office of a steward, and an overseer of all the property. So we see from kind of outside evidence that Joseph's story makes sense. That's what the archaeologists have revealed to us. In verse 3, Potiphar recognizes that Joseph is successful because the Lord is with him. And, it's very possible that Joseph has had some effect on his master's spiritual condition as well, because as the Lord was blessing him, Joseph probably had an opportunity to tell Potiphar where those blessings were coming from. And Joseph, I think, here is illustrating to us, exemplifying the faithful steward and is illustrating the principle of the one who's faithful in the little, God gives more responsibilities. God gives him charge over much. And so verses 5 through 6, when we get to those, gives us kind of a good view of Joseph as a young man who was responsible and faithful, both to his master and to his God. And it's interesting, actually, because as we are seeing these verses, right, about Joseph and about how God blessed him in verses 5 and 6, you know what one version that these verses undermine, and that is those individuals that think Joseph was a liar and a tattletailer and an arrogant adolescent. We see that that's not what his character was at all by looking at verses 5 through 6 here. It's a wonderful reminder for us to kind of see what God does. And that's what these first 6 verses show, is that because God was with Joseph, he blessed him in a lot of different ways. And I think the lesson to us, very simply, it's this: God is with us. We know that. He sent Emmanuel to us, right? And because God is with us, he can bless us through whatever life throws at us. And as long as we're faithful to him, not only will he bless us, but he will bless others on account of us, just as he did with Potiphar. So lots of other lessons here, but I think this is a really interesting point. Oh my, I just realized something. I'm out of time, and I'm only in point 1. So it seems like I've been here before. So we'll just close it out here, and we'll finish with the last 2 points next Sunday. I honestly did not know that I'd been talking for so long, but it was good because we had an opportunity to spend a little bit of time thinking through the things that we were grateful for as well. And I think it was a very helpful and beneficial exercise. And so I think as we go into the week of Thanksgiving, what I'll say at the conclusion here is this, and kind of close with this thought. As I mentioned earlier, I want to encourage you, kind of explicitly and directly this week, spend some time, make it before the Thursday lunch or dinner or breakfast, whatever you do in your family, where maybe you share what you're thankful for. Set some time aside before that time when you can just get alone with God, and just write down in your phone, on a piece of paper, whatever works for you. What are some of the things that you're thankful for? What are some of the things that God has blessed you with this year, both physically, spiritually, and in any other way that you've experienced this blessing? And I think, the wonderful thing that we see, and maybe this will help you from this first point that we've looked at from the first 6 verses of Genesis 39, is how has God been with you this year in 2025? And what are some of the things that you have learned as a result of God being with you? And so that's, I think, a great kind of a segue into next week and into the period of Advent, right? God was with Joseph, and Joseph prospered. For Joseph, that did not mean an immediate and complete and total removal from the hardships, but it meant a path forward through the hardships in a successful and faithful way. And that may be the same for us. God being with us may be that he does not remove us from the hardship, but he is building us. To Jenny's earlier point, he is building us through the hardship. He is giving us, building our faith muscle, giving us ability to see new things about him and learn new things about our own capacity to handle things when empowered by God, right? And that's God with us. That's Emmanuel. And that's what we'll look forward to beginning to celebrate next week as well. Let's bow. Father, we thank you for the fact that not only were you with Joseph, but you were with Isaac and Jacob before then, and David and Jeremiah after then, and every single one of us through the giving of your Son, Emmanuel, who's a powerful reminder that you are with us.